Okay, welcome, Monica.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. I guess a good point to start would be, could you give us an overview of your book, Thus Spoke the Plants, and the path that led you to writing it?
No.
Okay, well, could you try?
That's probably the hardest question that you could have asked.
Is it? Okay, well, it's a good one to start with.
No, because, well, first of all, I don't really know what I wrote in the book. Because it was a collaboration. And so there is not just me in the book, but all of the plants that are part of the book. And so some of those words, I was the hand that was typing on the keyboard, but it wasn't necessarily me typing as me saying what Monica needs to say. So no, I don't really know what's in there. But it's definitely a collaborative effort to bring through a more unified view of plants, but not only, from multiple perspectives and primarily through the lens of science and I guess what we might call spirituality. And as a scientist and as a spiritual being, I guess the plants must have just thought, like, this is perfect. Let's use her as a guinea pig. And so the book is the result of that collaborative effort. And it touches on science and it touches on all sorts of other experiences, some of which are probably not in this context. For many of you are not so out there, but for the more general audience, some of these experiences are out there or crazy or, you know, like, oh, she was just taking drugs and I don't do drugs. So
when you say it was not you writing it, would it be fair to say you were channeling the intelligence of the plants that you'd worked with?
Channeling is like many of the words that we use.
It's a little bit loaded, yeah.
Yeah, a touch, isn't it? So I like to think of it as a collaboration, literally. So as when you engage in a collaborative project with another human, you know, when you're having those beautiful brainstorming sessions and you are together, literally co-creating ideas and new visions and new spaces, at those times, nobody really owns the space, and in a way, the space can only arise if both parties disappear. And this is exactly how I feel this book came through. So to be a channel, it means that I'm there and I'm just like, you know, something comes through me. And instead it's like, I just disappeared. I took my way out of the way. And in a way, the plants did the same. And then what was left is what arose on the page. And so I have no idea.
So a better way to put that would be a flow state.
Perhaps that's better, yeah.
Where the self is not present.
Yeah.
But you become a vehicle for something else.
Exactly.
Interesting, yes. Okay, so you're first and foremost an animal ecologist, is that right? So what led you and brought you to studying plants?
Yeah. Okay, so I was always wanted to be a marine scientist, and so I did. I became a marine ecologist and I did all my university training as a marine ecologist. And I came to Australia to actually do my PhD on coral reef fishes, and I worked on the Great Barrier Reef, and very privileged to do all of my fieldwork in amazing places and a lot of time spent underwater. And I feel that was a perfect training. Of course, in hindsight, it's very clear, but because aside from the fact that, of course, I was in beautiful places doing amazing stuff. You know, you're diving and you're spending so much time just exploring, observing, counting. And in those moments, you don't really think that you've been, I would like to say, prepared for something else. So you're just doing your thing, thinking that, isn't this cool? And that's it. And but one day it was one big experiment that I was doing, and as an ecologist, I always worked in the field. So I don't take the animals in, or in this case, the plants. I went where they are, and I entered their space and their world. And of course, we are trained as scientists, and the myth of science as the objectivity method of observing. So you're not there, you're just this observer that is detached and doesn't matter. And in fact, of course, you totally matter because you are there, and suddenly that world is not the same world as when you're not there. The world is the world that it was plus you. And I had an amazing experience with my fish. And I was running this experiment, and I would be in the water pretty much every day for months. And I would spend lots of hours looking and observing the behavior of a particular species of fish during the reproductive season for months. And these fish are wild animals, and they would, come to my hand, and I would close my hand around it, and they would be like, this is Monica, she comes every day, You know her, yeah, I know her, And in a way, just as we think of relating with other people, human people, these were simply fish people. And I didn't see them that way yet. But they taught me that. Because the last day of the experiment, as it is often the case in much of the science, even if we don't advertise that aspect, the animal needs to be sacrificed humanely, which just means you have to kill it. And we have ethics permits that sanction that. And so it's okay. And you are trained to think it's okay. So nobody blinks, you just do it. It's your data after all, and you got this paper to write and to finish and all of that. And so I was totally trained to think like that and to feel nothing. And so I did what I was trained to do. But that day, when I went in the water, in the morning, I went in, I knew that was the last day of the experiment, but I just thought, I'll just go in. I spent so much time with these guys. I'll just go in, and I want to do a last one swim along the reef and just say goodbye to all of them. And I didn't have any nets, no poisons, no nothing, just me and my mind that knew. And I got in the water, and I had all of these, there was about 80 individual fish that I was following during that experiment, and nobody came out. Yeah, exactly. And so this horrible, chilling feeling inside, because in that moment, I knew that they knew. And not only that, but despite that, and this is an important story that I'm sharing just because it speaks a lot about conditioning. So despite that, despite the feeling, despite the realization of what was actually being shown, I still did what I was trained to do. So they put up a fight. Of course, they were fighting for their life. And so when I went back in the afternoon with my nets and all my things to collect them or to catch them, everyone was hiding and fighting back. They didn't want to be killed, of course. And it took a while. And I still did it because that's what I'm trained to do. But it was the last time too. Because in that moment, I also realized that what the fish was teaching me was we know what you are about even before you realize what you're about. And we are telling you by showing up in a particular way that you will recognize. And so I still went on and finished my experiment, but that was the last time because, of course, that cracked something and opened up this wound inside. And it was I cannot possibly do this ever again. But the science that I have been trained to do is demanding the sacrifice. So conflict, how am I going to do it? Maybe I can't be scientist anymore. And it just happened that a few months later I did a meditation retreat, and during the meditation retreat I had to go through hell. And I literally felt dripping off my hands, all of the blood of all the animals that I killed in the name of my science. And after that, though, it was a kind of cleansing, because after that was so no more. Simple. Doesn't matter what happens to your science. This is more important. The respect for life is more important than any of your science. If doing science means that you cannot respect life, then that science is not the science that you want to do anyway. And so in the midst of all this crisis, the plants arrived, because I just moved from Queensland to Western Australia, where I just had a position, brand new position, working on fish. And I was like, oh no. And of course, involved lots of more killing. And they didn't know that I had a bit of a crisis in the middle there. And so I started working in the garden, because we just moved into this new place and started setting up a veggie patch. And in the process of that, I started considering and being guided in a way. And basically the plants, simple, from my veggie patch, nothing too esoteric, but it was like, hey, you can work with us. If you need a sample, you just take a leaf and we don't die. It doesn't matter. And so, in a way, the initial step towards a different way of doing science started from the plants, not just as an inspiration, oh, I could work on the plants, but it's literally like, work with us. And so, for me, then, I always feel that the plants really rescued the scientist that was here. And then it became a question of, how do I show your amazingness? You teach me, how do I create the right space and the right condition for you to shine, to show what you're about? And of course, all sorts of plants then turned up. And some of which, of course, are famous because, we are all very keen on them. But some others are like, the humble green pea and basil and chili plants and tomatoes and it became very clear that it's like whatever is gonna do it, that's who you work with. And so, and we just talked about it before, it's like especially in this kind of community, often people say, oh, I'm in service. It's like, I think there is a long way to learn what really service means. And it took me 10 years to start to learn what it means to be in service, which means that it's not about you. And I guess the book is actually my first real service to this, because it's not about me. It's a message that needed to come out, that in theory, when I think of the book and I think of the academic environment, this book could be the end of my career, because it could be like, oh my God, just lock her up now. But it doesn't really matter. That's the thing. My career is not important. What is important is that there is a bigger vision that is dying to come out. And our job is to not let it die, but bring it out. And we're going to do it in whichever way and from all corners. That's why I'm pretty sure that the background of the people here in this room is very diverse, because we need everyone. So, long answer, I guess, but that's it.
That's perfect, yeah. So we're in that process was the catalyst to journey to the Amazon to work with ayahuasca.
Ooh, again, like, oh God. Well, the ayahuasca found me a while earlier, and then I've always had interesting dreams, and I didn't know that the dreams that I was having had a name, but I then discovered, like, oh, you're lucid dreaming. I was like, oh, is that how it's called? It's like I've been doing this for a long time. And so, yeah, I had a series of dreams that I knew is like, this is actually a real place. This is a real person, and this is calling me. And so I had a series of dreams with instruction exactly where to go, who to find, and then I just followed the trail. And so I ended up in Peru following the trail.
But you went from just drinking ayahuasca in ceremonies to dieta. Sorry. Not everyone may be familiar with the process of what dieta is. It's more an extension of working with ayahuasca to working with one specific plant. So how did that come about?
Well, when I got to Peru, it was very clear that I was going there for a dieta. And the dieta, of course, I'm just probably talking to the converted, but the dieta is, of course, a process of isolation. It can be very hardcore. It's not for everyone. And it's not about tripping around or anything. It's more about like, well, you're going to enter in this serious relationship with this one plant. And actually, it's in a way, it's a sort of marriage, because you are saying, I do. And when you say, I do this, it means that you're doing it for until death, separates you. So when you diet a plant in this way, the plants will be there with you forever if you do the process properly. And that's why the curanderos in Peru, but also in other traditions, have different names, but it's the same kind of process in the end. Are very proud of how many songs they hold and how many plants they've dieted, because it's like saying, I've got lots of friends, I've got lots of relationships, and these are serious relationships. And I honor them, they honor me, and we work together. And so when I got to Peru, it was very clear to me that that's why I was going. And in fact, the man that I did the first dieta with, which was the same man that was in my dream, when I arrived, he gave me this big grin as to say, now you're here, and that's your hat. And I'm like, I already know, because I already seen it. It's my hat, the one from my dream. And so it just felt like I didn't really know what I was getting into, but it just felt like as if I was moved into these places, and I was moved through the motion of these processes. And of course, to me, the dieta is really the work. The drinking of ayahuasca, for how beautiful and how potent and how precious and all of that it is, and I really, I honor that relationship deeply. But she's not the healer. She's the pintorera. That's how they call her. She paints the picture for you so you can see clearly. But there are many other plants, not just in Peru. Here in Australia there is plenty. And I was, of course, in Perth, where Western Australia is pretty much one of the most biodiverse places in the world for plants. So, I was placed exactly where I needed to be, and the plants in my neighborhood started to say, like, come and work with me. And I was like, but what? What do you mean? It's like, I don't know. And they were like, yeah, you do. We'll teach you. So I did several works with, guided by experienced, curanderos and elders. And then at one point, as the very first curandero told me, he's like, at one point the plants will call you. And I was like, okay. And I didn't understand that until it happened. And that was, of course, many years later. And at that point, it was like, oh, I know now what it meant. The plant will call you, and it will be just you and the plant, with no more intermediary, no more teacher. You have the teacher. The teacher was always the plant anyway. And so you go in, and it's a relationship that now you build on your own with this plant. And so then it becomes an incredible journey, because because then everyone wants to talk to you. And like, hey, you, I know you listen. I really got lots of cool stuff to tell you, and I can tell you what I'm good for and what you should use me for. And I'm like, oh no, I don't have time right now. So it it's great.
So what were the plants that you chose to dieta with? These like 30-day dietas, are they?
I didn't choose.
Okay, they chose you.
They always
the
do.
trees?
Yeah, the first one that I dieted was the Socoba tree, or Bejacocaspum, Caspi, sorry. And it's a kind of magnolia. It's a kind of frangipani, basically. Wow. And it was really funny because the first man that I worked with was a Shipibo man, and he said to me, I'm preparing your medicine. As soon as I arrived, he said, I'm preparing your medicine. And I was like, okay. And he told me the name, which of course meant nothing. And he pointed. It's like, so which one is my plant? And he pointed over there, kind of over there. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm looking down, looking for some little grassy little thing. And it took me days, It's like, I don't get it, Which plant did you say it is? And he's like, there. And he's like pointing. I was like, how can you not see it? It's big. And then I look and he's like, oh, the tree. It's like, of course, yeah, I've been pointing at it all the time. It's like, why are you looking down for some little... And and of course, then it made sense why the entire experience as well was, not that the size mattered, but it was very much a tree experience.
Okay. And which trees were these?
This is the Bejacocaspum.
Okay. And just that one?
No, I dieted many more plants over the years. And one of the, not the most recent, but one of the one that it was the most spectacular for me in terms of what it did for my science was the Ayahuasca, which is the cannonball tree. And that one was with a Kokama man and amazing curandero. And he didn't use ayahuasca. Mm-hmm.
Really?
So it's like, here is your... Well, actually, he started me on a different plant, which I dieted first. And then that plant told me through a dream that, he showed me this fruit. And I never seen a cannonball tree. So I was like, I don't know, I had this weird dream, and there was this man looking like a doctor handing me over this thing. And I started this guy, it looks like a ball, but I think it's a fruit. And the shaman was looking at me like, I know which one it is. And I'm like, oh no, this doesn't look good. And when they start grinning at you, you know that you're in trouble. And I'm like, yeah, I know which one it is. And I'm like, oh, do you really? He's like, you finish dieting this one, and then we'll go on to that one. So then the Ayahuasca came in, and of course, and this one actually is in the book because it was pretty spectacular. At one point, and again, as I said, he didn't use ayahuasca, so the entire dieta was just with that plant. And in a way, it was perfect because it just taught me that what the role of ayahuasca in this context is or isn't. And when ayahuasca might be used and might be included in the story, and when it's not required. And it doesn't make it less or worse. It's just simply in some condition, under some scenario, it's not necessary, in another is useful. And but the beauty of Ayahuasca, of course, one morning while I was dieting, I started writing in my travel diary, and I was scribbling and drawing the design for my experiment, which I didn't know I was going to do yet. So I was like, but what is this? And what is pipe sizes? And how many times? What? And as if I was being dictated. And, and I'm just scribbling as someone is telling me what to write. And then at one point, this voice really comes through clear. It's like, and by the way, not sunflowers, peas. And I'm like, what? And of course, that was about the associative learning or Pavlovian learning in plants. And I'm sure you are familiar with the story of Pavlov's dog. And that it's a kind of higher level learning that we are ascribing only to animals. And so I was interested in testing it in the context of plants. And I was I did try a few things with sunflowers. And but of course, that was not the plants that was going to show this. So it's like, peas, please. And now there I was. I had the entire design. I had the entire thing. I just had to go back home, book my lab, set up the thing, and let it run. And so I did. And of course, there were a few hurdles because there was more lessons there to be learned for me. But in the end, that's exactly what it came out. And this is the scientific level. It's quite an important study because it really disrupts the idea that only animals can do certain things. And moreover than that, it disrupts the idea that learning, memory, intelligence are defined by the brain. But plants don't have one, and yet they do the thing. So how are we going to deal with that? And yeah.
So do you believe that these prescient experiences, these visionary experiences, are coming entirely from the plants, or do you think the plants may be acting as a portal to knowledge that comes from other dimensions?
That's a good question. I think like with everything there is. As a scientist, of course, I subscribe to the idea of an evolutionary process. It might not be necessarily the Darwinian or neo-Darwinian description of that process, but I do think that there is an evolutionary trajectory at one level. And so, in a way, this question fits in that because I think that each one of us in the course of our life, or what we call our experience of life, goes through this process where at one point you are surrounding yourself by all the totems and the animals are talking to you and everything is like meaningful and symbolic, which really, it's interesting because you return to a very childish, but not as a patronizing way, like a childlike state where everything returns to life. And you killed it for a while. Your conditioning, as I was mentioning before, killed it for a while. And now, if you're lucky, you have the opportunity to rekindle the life in all of this that is around you. So then suddenly you're like, yeah, my totem such and such, or my whatever such and such, and they speak to me. And this plant said, and this spider said, and beautiful. And so you re-enter this symbolic way of experiencing life, which is, I think, absolutely essential. But I don't think that's it. That's not the end of the story. That's what I mean. And in the process of your own evolution as a consciousness, which I don't mean as an individual consciousness, but as the expression of consciousness, then you eventually realize, if you're lucky to have those experiences, you realize that actually there was no other ever. So when we talk about, and this is again another word in this kind of community, but it's not just here, we hear a lot, and the words in the language is totally been abused because it's used without real understanding of what we really, really deeply mean about those when we use those words. And one of those is oneness. It's all one. And it's like, yeah, but you need to really know it. And if you know it, then you can only live from that. And so I had a recent experience, thanks to yet another plant, who kept saying to me, and it kept dropping little bits of information about, like, you need to go to Mexico. I was like, Mexico? Why? And like, yeah, in this place. It's like, why? Like, in the dark. Why? You what? You want me to be in the dark for, what, 39 days? Why? But of course, maybe I am totally stupid, and so I followed. And in the process of that, of course, everything disintegrated, but in the most beautiful way. And what I mean by that is like the complete dissolution of anything other than what is. And the realization of anything other than what is, which doesn't have words to be described, it's part of the beautiful illusion. An illusion is not a bad word, it's just a dream that we are having. And what an amazing dream, as long as you remember that it's just a dream. And so, then there is no Monica and there is no plant. Nobody's talking. Who is talking? Who? And of course, at the same time, there is Monica sitting here in this form and this body, and there is lots of plants and lots of other people around. Not necessarily human people, I mean. And suddenly you realize that we do live in a dream that is, the game is about polarity. And if you get caught in the idea that the polarity is real, so you forget that you're dreaming, then yes, you're caught in trouble. But that's the game. And the only, there is only a place to be. When you realize that you are in polarity, there is only a way out. And it's like, sit in the middle, so you can see both. And then transcend the middle, because even the middle is a place. And he said there is no place, because it's not, the dream is a dream. So there is no plant, but there is lots of plants. And everyone is talking, but nobody's saying anything.
Okay.
Well, the dieta is not an idea of mine. The traditional experience that I had, it's actually pretty boring. You are confined in isolation. You are fed with food that doesn't taste like anything. And if you happen to be a vegetarian or a vegan, then it's really boring, because it's basically boiled rice and cabbage. And no salt, no sugar of any kind, so no fruits, no nothing that, and you are left there. And the first, depending on where you're at in your life and your own being, but you spend a good deal of that first bits of time going crazy with your mind. Just like if anybody of you has experienced, Vipassana meditation, the first few days are like total nightmare, which is the nightmare of your mind. And then eventually the mind is like, okay, I'm bored now. And you're like, oh no, now she's gonna give me the boredom story. And then eventually gets bored of that, and then it goes quiet. And then is when you can start hearing something. And then there is lots of space. And that's when the real gift of the dieta comes through. And in that sense, then it doesn't really matter whether it comes as a dream, as a voice, as a drawing, as a whatever. It's just literally you have entered the no space and no time. So everything becomes available. In theory, you have access to all the knowledge and the wisdom that you could ever want to know and wish for, because you are all that was ever there. And but to get there, you need to commit to this relationship. You need to say, I do. And you need to put the work. And maybe I should highlight one other aspect of this, because I guess it's becoming very fashionable in the West. And we were actually talking briefly about this, we just touched, but it's an issue that for me is very clear. This process does not have a price, monetary price. It is not for sale, and if anybody is selling it, that's not the dieta. And I know that it's been sold. And that is the old mind. That is the colonial mind that has created the problem that we are trying so desperately to resolve. We cannot reproduce the same, no matter how nicely we dress it up with, oh, it's all for love and light and money. But that's like, in bracket. So this is not a process that is for sale. And that was very clear. And it did come through for me in the dieta. Because the moment it's sold, aside from many other things, you're being ripped off, actually. Because the amount of, and the deep, drenching feeling of gratitude that you receive because someone offered their time, their love, their energy to hold you in that space while you are exploring, to keep you safe, to keep this body safe while you are off exploring, to know who you are, which is the biggest gift that anybody can give you. Well, if you are paying for it, that just like, it's almost like, it takes the carpet under your feet. It just ruins it. It's not what this is about. And we have to stop thinking, literally thinking, because this is a mind issue, thinking that we can just sell things, we can just pay for things. Some things are not for sale, and this is definitely one of those. But I have a strong opinion about it, so that's it.
That leads nicely into another question I had, and that is, do you think ayahuasca has equal benefit outside of the Amazon? And could you speak a bit to the way ayahuasca has spread so rapidly around the globe in the past few decades?
I know that there are plenty of anthropologists here in Australia as well who are working on these exact kind of issues and trying to understand what kind of component of society is attracted to this and what's happening and how it's been moved around, both physically but also like as a cultural concept, I guess. And so I'm not really the best qualified in a way to discuss this in those terms, because there are people obviously who are studying these specifically and they would be able to speak to it much better. But at my own personal experience is that there is this idea, well, first of all, plants will find their way, and they will find you if that's what you're meant to experience. And so whether it's in the Amazon or it's here or it's anywhere, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. But what it does matter, of course, is the container within which they present themselves, and who is really the custodian of those spaces or not. And in a way, it's what's happening in the context of ayahuasca, for example, that I've been observing. Suddenly there is this mushrooming around of. They're all shamans, and they're all giving you ayahuasca. And, I went to Peru once, therefore I'm qualified now. Or I did an online course. And it's like, and I'm sure you have met some of these, and, they usually are very good with their feathers in their head, and they sing the Icaro, but it's not theirs, so it's got no power. And they shake their rattle, but anybody can shake a rattle. You give it to a 5 months old and they will also shake. So, and I'm not saying that everyone around is like, oh, don't believe them, but there is a lot, like always, with everything. There is a lot of the, I guess, spiritualized ego that is just taking over, as is done always. And as, it's part of our nature. So I guess there is that, but at the same time, which is the beauty of our plants, for me, our plants work, is like by presenting this and by arriving in this context, like say in Australia, under these conditions, is really demanding your soul and your higher expression of yourself to like, come on. Are you still going to fall for the little childish tricks? Or are you actually going to really listen, really see through, and make the right choice that comes within integrity, your integrity, because you know what's in integrity. You know why you're going and sitting in those circles. You also know that although we say ayahuasca or many others are not addictive, well, the little ego is addicted to many things. Give it anything, and it will create a nice addiction to it. And whether it's emotional, is because, but it feels so good to be in the tribe. What kind of tribe? Aren't we all here together? Aren't we one? Don't we say that? And then we talk about tribes as if there is others that are not part of the tribe? Who is talking? And that's the thing. By allowing the deliverance through the shadow is really calling even louder than ever to say, like, come on. Can you see the polarity all over again? Can you see this is the old game? Can you wake up to it? Can you be in the middle? Watch it and then transcend it. So it's a great process.
So particularly when you speak about ayahuasca having, an intelligence and an agenda of its own, sort of partly in the way that it's spread around the world. As a scientist, what are the different channels that these plants use to communicate with us? So what is the mechanism there? Is it say the neurotransmission of DMT, or DMT being a neurotransmitter? Mm-hmm. How would you explain the way plants talk to us, particularly as you said through dreams and through various aspects of our lives?
Yeah. So from a strictly scientific perspective, and this is part of the work that I do as a scientist, there are many channels that plants use to communicate, not just with anything really, like other animals, including ourselves, but also between them, amongst them, and mushrooms and bacteria and viruses, and these cover the entire spectrum from the chemistry and in the context, not like a what compound, but literally the smells, the plants, the volatiles the plants release in the air are words that they are speaking to who can listen. And some of those words are for neighboring plants. Some of those words are for attracting the attention of insects that might help them or not. Some of the words are words of light, literally. And so plants, and we have known this in science for a long time now, that plants are using, and they're very good at detecting changes in the ratio between different light frequencies. So, and those changes will tell a plant what's happening next to it, for example. And then, of course, touch, and now that was part of my contribution in terms of acoustics, so sound. And we know now the plants have their own acoustic world, which means that they both emit their own sounds and perceive sounds, which is not really surprising because, sounds is everywhere. And we know now, as this research is opening and developing further, that, of course sound is relevant to the plants, and is not just any sound, but we know some of the work that I've done showed how plants can find water because they're listening for it. And yeah, so, and not only that, but if there was a recent study from colleagues in Israel, for example, they showed that a plant will be listening to the sound of the bee approaching. So the bee is not even arrived yet, but the sound, of course, has arrived. And is listening to the sound of the wings, so the buzz, really, and is within minutes is increasing the amount of sugar in the nectar of the flower. So that, of course, now it's suddenly much more attractive. And he's doing it because he knows there is a bee approaching. Hey, let's, am I all good? So do I look good? Okay. And of course, we also know that in the context of defense, for example, this was a study from colleagues in the US, where they had a plant under attack by a herbivore. And actually, this was a little caterpillar, which is the typical caterpillar that, unfortunately, if you have a veggie patch, you will be way too familiar with because he eats everything. And this is like the cabbage, horrible caterpillar. And so they had this plant being chewed on by this caterpillar, and they recorded the sound of the caterpillar chewing. And then they went to a plant that never experienced the caterpillar over there, and they just played back the sound. And this plant was like, oh, there is a caterpillar. And he started putting the chemicals that they use, and we know they use as a defense. There was no caterpillar around, just the sound. So obviously these like sound of water, sound of an herbivore that potentially could be an enemy, or sound of like someone that you really want to be attracted for, they're all useful things for the life of a plant. And so it's no surprise, and I'm sure that although these took a while to break the wall within the more traditional academic system, but I'm pretty sure that this will be an area of research that we're going to see flourish very fast.
Okay, so given that association with acoustics, how do you think that ties into the function of ikaros, and the songs the curandera sings in ceremony, which he has learned from the plants directly through dieta, and then can sing in ceremony and actually carry the healing properties of that plant? Yeah. Is that working the same way, do you think?
It's all sound. So, it is all sound. So of course, that was one of the reasons why I started working on this as well, like as the scientist. It was like, wow, okay, so there are the famous Icaros from Peru, but then this story of humans receiving songs or some kind of sounds from plants and using them to heal their people, or listening to the plants or talking to the plants. There is a lot of folklore around these concepts, and as either this is a story that we really love telling, and that's fine, or maybe there is something into it and just science hasn't dared looking into it properly. And so that was what propelled me to go and look into the acoustics of, plants. But honestly, I didn't really understand, as often is the case. Borrowed knowledge doesn't work. Borrowed knowledge is what you can revomit back because someone taught you about it, but unless you have your own experience of it, you will never have the real knowledge and the real wisdom that knowledge brings. And so for me, although of course I was very curious and interested in, these Icaros, maybe I can record the plant, whatever, and, it didn't really register until one plant called me and he said, it's time for you and I to diet alone. And I'm like, what? And it's like, yeah, do you remember you were told? And like, yeah, this is how it happens. And that really was the time when I was given the Icaro of that plant. And that's when I understood what the Icaro feels like. So when they sing, they're singing the feeling of the plant being in. And because of that, when that sound is delivered outward towards someone, say that it's got something, that's why it's got potency. And that's also why, as I was kind of hinting before, is like shaking your rattle or putting the feathers on your head is pretty, but it's got no power, really. And unless it's really grounded inside, and the only way to do it is for you to have to go through the experience yourself. And it was interesting because I didn't really know until then, and this then has happened multiple times afterwards, but that one time I finished the dieta and I was like, oh my God, I think this plant just gave me this weirdo song. And And then a few days later, someone appeared in my life that was like, oh, I have this problem and I'm trying to resolve it. And in the back of my head, I keep feeling the plant that I just dieted, saying like, it's about me. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. It's like, yeah, you just had to sing my song. And I was like, no, please, it looks like I look like an idiot. What am I going to say? It's like, sorry, do you mind if I sing you? And but as they have a tendency to do, they just like, the situation became as it was. And I was singing onto this person. And and a month later, and I didn't think of it anymore. I was like, okay, happy now? Huh? You see? Widow. And then a month later, I received an email from this person, which I didn't see since that event. And she was like, do you know, whatever you did, it stopped it. It's gone. And I was like, shit, really? It's like, oh no, it works. But that's the thing. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, it wasn't about me. Actually, if anything, it was kind of interfering of like, no, I don't want to do this. And these songs are medicine because they have their own agency in a way. They know when it's time and they will come out, whether you like it or not. And they will do their job, whether you like it or not, whether you believe in it or not, whether you want it or not. And so in a way, to me, it felt like as a scientist, it was the perfect, there was no placebo there for me because actually, if anything, I was trying to interfere with the process. Like, no, this is not working. I'm not doing this. This is stupid. And instead, the plant was like, we'll show you. You know nothing. And yeah.
Okay, we'll throw over to the audience questions soon, but to sort of, I guess, to finish off my line of inquiry here, so how do you reconcile that metaphysical, spiritual, experiential phenomenon like the such you just described with working within a strict scientific paradigm such as a university, and how do they receive that?
There are a couple of colleagues here that know how I've been received. As always, and I think, I can't remember now who said that, but there's been very many variations of the same kind of idea. It's like first they will, ignore you and say it's not possible. Then they will attack you. And then at the end, they'll be like, we always knew that. I think I went through the, just freaking, she doesn't exist, just ignore it. No. And then I went through the phase of like, attack! And then I think now they are starting to, at least for some things, they're starting like, it kind of makes sense. We kind of knew this. There's nothing new about this. And I was like, okay, it's cool with me. That was job done. So I think I'm at a place now where because there is no more conflict here, I am not trying to hide. And I'm aware that in certain environments, I need to be kind of how I speak and how much I offer. Some environments allows me to offer more openly, and some other environments, it's not that I'm lying or I'm cagey, but in some other environments to speak as openly as I can do, it's not kind, because it would just say, but I don't understand. And so then there is a breakdown in communication instead of a real communication and a real sharing. And if the point is to share with each other, then it is my job, I see as my responsibility, to be as clear as I can. And if that means there's some things that they don't need to be spoken yet, then you do so. It's not that you're lying, you're just not overloading with things that like the other is not quite ready to hear all of this. So you just give what it's ready, and slowly, you wouldn't start, expecting a 2 months old to do crazy maths or crazy, whatever. They are 2 months old. So you are gentle and kind. And so, yeah, I think that it was the resolution of the conflict here that allowed me to say, okay, this is who I am. I am a scientist because I'm curious, because I know how to apply a particular method, which we call the scientific method. And those, to me, are the two main ingredients for good science. You want to ask questions, you're interested in, maybe, if you're lucky, finding some answers, and you have a method that you apply. But I'm also very aware that that's just one way of being in the world, and is not exclusive to, or doesn't exclude any other way. And so I guess through this process, and especially as the book came out, and it kind of like, there you are, now it's all in the pages, and so there is nowhere to hide. And it feels really good. And if people, colleagues, have problem, then they can come and talk to me. If they don't come and talk to me, then I don't have a problem. Like, I don't know. And yeah, and if this, as I mentioned earlier as well, is like, if me being me means that I have to lose my career, well, okay, I lost it already once. When I finished, in 2015, I was awarded a really big grant from the federal government to do the acoustic, so the sound of plants. And despite my colleagues were like, what is that? It's like, are you joking? This is not science. It's like, watch me. And then I got the grant, and when my fellowship ran out, basically I closed the door of my office and I disappeared. Nobody cared. Nobody actually, I think they were quite happy that I was disappearing quietly. And of course, it was another moment of crisis, in the sense that it was just like where we started. It's always going in circle, but there was this moment like, oh my God, but I am a scientist. This is what I'm good at. And if I'm not this, what am I? Who am I? And then that question pestered me for the next 3 years. It's like, it's time for you to find out. Who are you? Without all your things and all your labels and all the things that you think you are. And of course, in that process, the book arose and came through, and literally by the time the book came out, it was just like, I'm just here. And if you don't like it, shame. Because I think that what's here is beautiful. And because what's here, it's here, it's here. So if you don't like it, you don't like it. And that is the problem. And that is like, that actually makes me feel for you. So it's okay. Let's talk about it if you want to. And if you don't want to, it's okay. And yeah, the resolution of the conflict here definitely reverberated, of course, inevitably, outside.
So yeah, check out the book.
We'll take this one off.
Yeah, and then we'll go to audience questions.
First of all, thank you for actually being an authentic scientist, because I know what it's like on the inside, and I know how much that publish or perish mentality actually just gets in the way of people being authentic scientists and following the path that they truly want to study, because they're afraid to not get money. They're afraid to not, that's a true example, and that happens all the time in science. If you're not publishing in an area that's widely accepted and popular, your career can end, and you shut the door and people don't look twice. So thank you for being authentic. I think that's awesome. You mentioned that plants can hear. That's amazing. Like I'm just wondering, because it sounds like you did the experiments and shown that they respond purely to sound only, no other sort of signals. We have ears to hear. How do plants hear? Like what what is their sensory organ? Like how do they actually perceive sound?
Well, I should just clarify one thing before I get to that. That I am employed again, and at the University of Sydney. So I've actually got upgraded because I was a UWA, and according to their standards, University of Sydney is ranked much higher. So just to clarify that the plants during the period of time when I was unemployed, they told me, it's like, when have we not looked after you? So please trust. And literally the moment, and I'm not kidding, the moment I put the full stop on that book was the 1st of April. And of course, I went to my garden, and the plants in my garden were like, who is the fool that didn't understand, 1st of April? First. And second, within 10 days, the colleague, which is now my colleague here in Sydney, was like, hey, I've got this opportunity. Would you be interested in applying for this grant together? And I'm like, yeah, I guess the book is finished and I'm ready to go. And this is the grant that is supporting the new research now. And there is more money coming for this, for the cognition, for the mind of plants, which of course is about our mind, really. So, and that brings me to your question. And the idea that plants can see or can hear, and it's like, oh, you're just anthropomorphizing. You're making plants as humans. It's like, no. First of all, my intent is, if any intent is there, is to do the other way around. I would like human people, to become a little bit more like plants. And then the world might look a little better. But in the specific context of the acoustics and the sound, and how sound is perceived, well, if you think about our own way of perceiving sound, right? So it's a vibration. It's a mechanical vibration, which means that sound is a kind of touch at a distance, is a form of touch. And in fact, the vibration in our ears needs to touch hairs and little bones, and this signal is passed through, and then eventually, in our context, is being transduced. So it's translated from the mechanical form, or acoustic in this case form, into the Esperanto of all cells, which is what the neurons do. They transform all the signals, whether it's light, sound, or whatever, into the one language, which is electrochemical, which is the one that then the brain can kind of make sense of. Now, plants, we know, have touch genes, and we know have mechanoreceptors. And so, fundamentally, they're doing exactly the same. It's just that they're doing it in a plant way. Does that make it less? No. And that's why, as well, when we talk about but plants don't have brain, how can they remember, how can they learn, where do they store the information? It's like, well, do you know that most of the decisions that you make every day are totally irrational? And this is a fact. And irrational, not in the philosophical and anthropological sense, but like scientifically speaking, like you are not using your brain to make those decisions. You're using what in the technical term is heuristics, but another word for that would be rule of thumbs or gut feelings. And it's like basically, if you were to make all of your decisions with your brain involved, you will burn out within 5 minutes. And instead, your brain is involved in some decisions, and most of the decisions that you make during the day kind of bypass the brain. So you have a brain, and you don't use it to make decisions. So basically, some other organisms don't have a brain, and they don't need one to make those decisions. And in fact, the new project that I'm involved in, and we are developing, is exactly about that. It's about looking at these questions of memory, learning, choice, decision-making, so the cognitive realm, from a down-up direction. So starting from the organisms that we consider the most basic or basal, Those ones that don't have brains, don't have neurons, they're simple. That's how sometimes we talk about them. And moving from there upwards, if there is an upward, towards those that have evolved with brains, and including the humans. There is no pyramid. That's the bottom line. So the idea of the entire project is to show, actually, it's not that because you have a brain, now you are at the apex of your evolutionary process. Like, simply as a human, if you're going to move fast, and if the brain is the thing that is going to facilitate that, then it's a good idea to waste a lot of energy creating a brain that is a super expensive organ to have. That's why we need to eat so much, because most of the energy needs to go there. So if you, like a plant or like a sponge, who actually has a life that starts mobile and looks like any other larvae of a fish or other critters, and then it just like, do you know what? I had enough of this movement. I'm going to settle somewhere nice, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life, and some sponges can be very old, and I'm going to just sit here and allow for food to come to me. Much easier. Why would I go always chasing it? So if you have food is coming to you, reproductive materials like gametes and sperm and ovaries are coming to you, why would you want to have something so expensive that if the role of that thing is just to make you move fast? You are achieving the same goal just in a different way. In a way, maybe even a smarter way, because it's cheaper, and you've been doing that for a long time. So the idea is just to break down this concept of hierarchy in this, in the creation, and just show that there are many ways to be life, but life is life. So in that sense, it returns to this idea of, we're all one. We're all fundamentally just kind of made of the same stuff, presented in different forms, and different forms have different requirements, and that's the beauty. That's all.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll go to the audience for some questions. We can do this a couple of ways. You can either shout out your question, and I'll repeat it to Monica if she can't hear it, or you could come up front and use the mic. So, does anyone have a burning question?
So I've got a farm, and I'm experimenting with different ways of growing things water-wise because of the drought and that kind of stuff, and looking at hydroponics and wicking beds and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I was concerned that I've been using recycled materials. I'm concerned that maybe some of the BPAs and the plastic molecules are getting in the plant, and then we eat them, and it's potentially bad for our health. Mm-hmm. And a week ago, I couldn't find any material on the internet saying yes or no. And a week ago, I asked a friend to give me a psychic reading, and she channeled this stuff for me and said, well, it depends. And she said that there's certain frequencies that you can give to the plants that will either make the plastic molecule bioavailable for us or inactive, and also another frequency that would just stop the plant from absorbing it in the first place. She says, you're a musician, come up with it. I'm like, okay, how am I going to do that? But then I read I got a book, The Hidden Life of Trees, I think it is. Mm-hmm. And within the first chapter, you were mentioned in it. And I read it on Friday, and then I Googled you and thought, oh, you're here. So here I am. Do you know of any specific frequencies or how I might go about finding how this works?
Well, that sounds like a good research project.
Yeah.
The answer is no, really. Like, no, I don't know the answer to the question. Intuitively, my first reaction would be like, don't use plastic. And I'm trying really hard to do that with my new lab. Because, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, we use so much plastic in science. Everything is constructed by plastic. All of those pipettes being thrown away, like one use and throw away. And it's part of the way in which science is constructed, So, so plastic is obviously a big theme. And as we know, it's of concern. So anything that can reduce that in the first place would be good. And I think in a way that would be, instead of trying to fix the problem is like, can we go to the root of it and just remove the problem in the first place? So my question to you would be, instead of trying to find the right frequency that maybe neutralize the effect of the plastic uptake can you find a material that is no plastic that could do the job?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. So go for it.
Yeah.
And then you can just
plastic, you can just use it for something constructive rather than putting it in the rubbish.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely I could do other things as well.
Yeah, and then I would be very interested because I want you to build my veggie patches in that way.
Sure. Love to. Great. Deal.
Thank you.
Thanks.
First of all, thank you so much for all your work that you're doing. I'm also a fellow communicator that talks and hears plants. Often sat there thinking, geez, I wish somebody would do something to prove that this is real. So amazing work, well done. I am just very curious about whether in the future that you would be researching the difference in people's vibration and whether plants respond differently to like different people communicating with them. Like let's say you had a whole bunch of people who claim that they can speak to plants and listen to plants in a room and some that don't. And so getting the people that don't believe in or haven't had that experience before and whether those plants would be responding equally to that. Have you thought of doing something like that? Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yep. I did say that the science is opening up, but not that open. So I am currently doing, I would say, a precursor to that. There are a few steps to put in place before we can ask that question safely, in the sense that then it cannot be shut down. Otherwise, if it's too premature, it's easy to like, nah, it's all whatever, fancy stuff. And instead, my role, I guess my job is make sure that this is sharp and watertight. And then they might not like it. They don't have to like it. But the data is there. They don't have to believe it, because that's not science. Otherwise, do religion or philosophy, you know? But as science, if we are to respect the rules of the scientific method, I don't need your belief. Just I show you my data, you show me yours. So to get there to what you are suggesting, and of course there are many variants of the same, there are a few steps to be taken. And right now I have 3 little peas doing their thing, and we'll see what they are doing. And it's it's very early, because I just started this. But it's, again, like it was for the acoustic stuff, is such a recurrent theme. There is like, come on, there must be something here that needs to be clarified. And it doesn't mean that I have to prove that the people that talk to plants are better, or the plants do respond. Maybe they don't. Are we happy? Are we open to accept that? At least as scientists. It doesn't mean that you can't talk to your plants, but like as science cannot really settle that. It's possible. And then it makes it even more powerful if science, coming from this place, then it makes it more powerful if science actually finds out, actually it does work. So you're not biasing already what you're expecting to find. You're just allowing for whatever needs to be arising to arise. And because if you think about it as well with the acoustic of the learning, this is not the first time that scientists have, over the centuries, the scientists like, come on, plants can learn. I think they can remember. I think, and it was just not the right time. So it's not that I'm doing anything special. It's just that I'm arriving at the right time. So I'm hyper conscious of the idea that I need to deliver things at the right time. And it's the same concept of before, like to be kind to both parties. Otherwise, there is a missed opportunity for sharing. And that is the ultimate goal for me. So if doing it in a hurry just to settle a small idea of mine or a small field of mine, then it becomes about me or about, a few of us, and it's like, that's not in service. So, but I'm working on it.
That's exactly the same as psychedelic science and its current journey back into mainstream, right? And I think it was Rick Doblin came and gave a talk, and one of his big insights is we can't be counterculture. We've got to be within the culture and change that culture from within.
Yes.
Questions? Anyone?
Hi. Jesus. Sorry. Maybe that's a sign. Look, I've drank ayahuasca about 50 times, and I have
Congratulations.
That's not a show-off. That's more just clarifying how many times I've gone in and very deeply and done dieta and had huge learnings and had huge insights that have changed the course of my life drastically. I have never had a direct conversation. I've never had verbalized communication. Can you explain to me, first of all, what those voices sound like to you? Is it in English? Do they have personality? Do they have gender? Is it a voice or is it a feeling? Is it a sense? And those messages that you're getting, is that the chemicals that are in your brain activating thought processes in yourself, or is it a spirit of something that's circulating around outside?
So the answer is a question. Who is asking?
Who am I?
Who is asking?
Who's asking that?
Who is asking that?
Exactly. Under the influence of ayahuasca, I could probably give you a far better answer than the one I could come up with now.
The one that is posing the question now, who is asking the question, is my question. If you have these experiences as deeply as you are saying, then you wouldn't be asking the question. Because who said that they need to be sounding like voices? Who said that they have to be of a particular kind? That is a very human and a very ego way of wanting to construct something so that I can hold it and instead that's exactly what the plants are disrupting. It's like, we're not going to do it the way in which you're expecting. We're going to do it the way in which you're not expecting, so that it can come through and cut through your shit before you grab it and make it into the new pile. And I'm not, attacking you.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm just, it's just that I hear time and time again so many people saying, they told me this. And I'm going, I get these understandings and these insanely photographic journeys through powerful realms and come out with lessons, but I've never had what has felt like a direct conversation. Other people will say, oh, no, it spoke to me.
Yeah, so I'll give you a personal example of this. It's like, I regretted it, but it was too late. After the very first journey, I said to her, like, look, let's not do these flashy colors and whatever. Like, cut the crap and let's go to work. And she was like, okay. And I never had a vision after that. Like all of the pretty realms that you're discussing, and I had been in places where the medicine was quite strong, and I know that everyone was like, did you see the flying elephant? No. So, because I asked for that. And so I don't want to waste my time with these pretty little colors. I mean, they're pretty. And now that I asked you not to, I'm a little jealous when I hear other people describing them. But what I'm trying to say is like the communication doesn't have to come in a pre-formatted way. And so I don't have visions, but because I'm synesthetic, the way in which I feel, I can describe it to you as if I saw it. And so I can deliver it to you as if it was a vision, but it wasn't a vision. I didn't see it. So even the idea of a voice telling you, you don't necessarily have to hear a voice speaking like this, but it might be delivered, and that's the best way in which we can then share. So are you getting your lessons? Yes, it seems so.
Yeah.
Is there another question? Do you want to yell it out and we can just repeat it up here, or do you want to come up? So for those really complex, long questions, we can do that in person afterwards. But yeah.
But something's just come through in regards to what that man said to me, and I don't know if it's relevant or not, but one of the things that I do is I massage people. And I'm often directed by light. I don't know why. I just get directed. It's not like I see light. It's whatever. And anyway, I massage my children, and I was massaging my 6-year-old one day, and he said to me, "Mummy, did you see that light?" Mm-hmm. And I said to him, because I don't talk about the light. For maybe the first 45 years of my life, I never told anybody I saw light. And I looked at him and I said, "What light?" I said, "Did you see the light?" And he said, from the words of a 6-year-old, he said, "I perceived that I saw the light."
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's a pretty advanced 6-year-old.
And
there you go.
That's how my experience is on anything on that level. It's not tangible. He just nailed it for me.
Yep.
So I just thought I'd share it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And maybe can I add something that might ground that a little bit more, so that it doesn't look like these are experiences that are like, whoa, so only for special people, you know. And so let's disrupt this idea that there is a tribe. We are only one humanity. And so Darwin, you know, the father basically of the new history of biology, who actually is very famous, of course, for his work on animals and, the theory of natural selection and all of that, which, of course, we all know is based on animals. But in fact, the inspiration came from his observation on plants, first. And second, in his career, he wrote 8 volumes on plants. And he was a very keen observer. And one thing that he used to do, and I have a colleague who is actually in Spain, he's a mad philosopher, and he's doing it because he's getting obsessed with these concepts. And so what Darwin used to do, it was like, okay, I realized that plants and humans, or many animals, live in very different time scales. And from the human perspective, or the animal perspective, we look into plants as like, they don't move, they don't do anything, yeah? But what Darwin used to do, it was like, okay, so I'm just gonna sit here in front of this plant, and I'm just gonna stare. And he would stare for hours. And he would stare, but not like, he would stare like that soft staring that you're like kind of looking but not looking. And eventually, your eyes adjust to the new time scale, and they see things that you thought you couldn't see. So actually, we think that the limitation is like, physiologically, and the eyes are not designed to. Not true. Darwin wrote about these experiments that he was doing, and he was just like, by staring, what he was really doing, he was slowing down this. And so he kind of entered into the other time scale where the plant and the human for a little moment were in the same space. And so he could see, especially with climbers, because he was a little bit obsessed with climbers, and I understand that, because I work with, peas, exactly, so it's like, and now I have to try with beans, because, and he could see them moving. Of course, there is another way to do it, which is cheating, and it's what I'm doing in my lab, and you use time-lapse photography. But the idea is like, actually, if you really want to commune and find the space, the common ground, there are many ways. And so some plants, like ayahuasca, are just really exaggerating some of these spaces. But we are totally naturally, by design, by what we're totally naturally already geared up to see everything, including things that we think we shouldn't be seeing. And there are plenty, if you do any martial arts, if you do any particular kind of meditation, there are plenty of experiences that you can have without having, that they're totally psychedelic, but you're not taking anything. You're just drinking up what's already here. So lights is like, yeah, of course. What is this space? Yes. That's why you need kindness.
We've got time for one more question with orange stripey.
Orange stripey.
Yeah. And then we're going to do the raffle for the book.
Ooh.
Thanks for the really interesting talk. I recently watched a really interesting documentary. It was called How to Grow a Planet. And that was a 3-series documentary. And it was basically showing the intelligence of plants from the beginning of this planet, how they've evolved and how they shape where we are actually right now. And throughout that huge story, there are parts where there is actually a lot of competition between the plants as well, within the forests, also grass coming to the surface and trying to dominate the land. And so there is that, I think, Darwinian nature as well, a little bit from the beginning and how we are here right now. And when we look at the bigger picture, I feel as a human nation, we are a big threat to the planet from many ways that we live and all those things, though we have so many beauties and creative nature as well within us. So if plants were to act from that survival nature and to continue their dominance on this planet, there's just one answer is that why would they even help humans to perhaps continue to dwell on this planet? And from your story, they seem to be your great allies and helping you to progress. And I've heard many great stories as well. They've been super helpful, though they can also be used for not necessarily very constructive ways, perhaps by the intention of the facilitators. But overall, that feeds into the question of these plants, whether they are being basically doing their work through a greater intelligence, and that's basically saying, oh, actually humans need to stay here more, perhaps they have more things to learn. Could you elaborate on that role of plants and they're helping us, essentially? Do you agree on that?
Thank you, and there is a lot of stuff in there, obviously. I guess the first point that I'd like to make is, the idea of competition, it's a very human idea. Because in fact, even when we look properly in nature, and for a long time, this has been the way in which we have looked at Darwin itself, and the idea that everything is just there to survive. No, it's not true. Everything is there to flourish. So most of the systems, even when we see competition, because competition is a good element, it creates diversity. Otherwise, you get straight into a monoculture, right? So competition is a beautiful ingredient, but in fact, it's not the main ingredient. It's actually facilitation, so cooperation. And it's from the beginning, when you look at the body, and our cells need to cooperate to actually keep this body as a body, and we know very well when cooperation gets interrupted, and we have disease. And then if you escalate from that to, well, you can go both inwards or outwards, and it's the same story. It's like even in a forest, you need a little touch of competition because that makes the life exciting. It's like you need to, create a bit of diversity and a little bit of entertainment. But the reality is that a forest wouldn't really survive if it would, eventually you will lose the forest. And so really the cooperation between different parts and components is what makes the forest. And a good example in science is the work from Suzanne Simard in Canada, where, of course, the now famous World Wide Web where it's a constant cooperation and competition, a little touch for, the big trees, the small trees, different species of trees, under the ground with the mycelium, on top of the ground with the animals that are spreading the seeds or taking away or eating away. So it's the idea that we are not very good, at least in this moment in time, we don't seem very good at seeing things as complex dynamic systems. We want them to be simple, and we want them to be kind of monotone. So it's like, it's all competition, or it's all facilitation, it's all one species, and that doesn't work. But it's reflected very well in the economic systems that we have, homogenized. And of course, in the context of plants and agriculture, monoculture. Genetic modified, so that we can all control and make it all good and all the same. That's not how nature works. And that's why it's missing, actually, the competition element that gives spice to life, although competition is not the main element or the main ingredient that makes all this cohesive together. Now, and that was the first thing that, got me as I was listening to your question. Then I guess the question of plants helping us is like, without going anywhere too esoteric, is like, I don't know about you, but most of the stuff that I'm wearing, it's because they are helping us. Most of the stuff that I'm eating, actually, I'm vegan, so pretty much all of the stuff that I eat is because they are helping us. How long can you hold your breath for? They don't need to go too esoteric to show themselves as like, we're definitely helping you to be here. You just need to recognize that. So it's actually, in a way, these special plants, although they are all special, and as you work with them, you realize, oh my God, are you serious? You've been sitting in my garden for ages, and you're such a spectacular healer for this and that, and you're doing this and this and this. And so the idea, I guess, is like, they've been here for a long time. They have the wisdom, and literally the knowledge is embedded, is embodied, is inscribed in their flesh. And as we consume that flesh, whether it's with our food, with our medicine circles, with whichever, it's always a ceremony, it's always a ritual. And they, to me, if you can take all of, no matter what you're doing, but it's like if you can take that one little tomato when you're having your salad, and it's like, yes. And do it with gratitude, but really feel it. It's like, my God, this is just gonna create this again. And it's gonna do such a good job, because if you think about it, there are so many things that could go wrong with your body all the time. And instead, wow, it works. And sustain, support constantly, no matter how many times we say, I'm going to cut you down, by the plants, really, primarily. Even if you eat animals, well, the animals were eating plants first, right? So, yeah, in that sense, I think, of course, they're here to help us. They've always been here to help us. But only not because we are hopeless, only because we forgot. And they are the keeper of knowledge, so they are helping us to remember who we are. And the quicker we do that, the better. And then we're all here to stay. And I'd like to finish with the words of an elder here from this area, actually. Well, she's based in Wollongong, and she's an academic, and she was sharing this with a friend of mine. And he told me, because I had a tendency to say a similar thing, and I was like, and I'm sure you heard this before. It's like, the planet would do so much better if the humans would just clear up, just get rid of us, and everyone else will be just fine without us, And she's an Aboriginal elder, and she said to this friend of mine, and then he related to me when I said that, and he said, what she said to me? She said that the earth would cry whether it was a bacteria that was going to go extinct, whether it was a butterfly, whether it was a big eagle, whether it was a tree, whether it was a human. To her, they are all precious in the same way. So to her, she wants all of them to stay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll quickly get you to draw the winner.
Oh my God. Responsibility.
Yeah, there we go. So that is D82.
Oh my God!
D82.
No, sorry, that was a mistake.
Yeah, no, draw it again.
He's way too excited.
Fantastic. Let's jump up and get a photo. That's perfect, bro. Oh my God. Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about it this whole time.
That's you.
I'm like, Caleb,
Awesome.
pay attention to the thing. I know if the universe wants it to happen, it's going to happen. I know I forgot to. There was no ATM. I could not find an ATM. I was going to have to ask one of my dear friends in the audience whether I could borrow some cash to get this wonderful book.
There you go,
And I was like,
perfect.
oh, I mean, it could happen, but there's probably like 100 other people. I mean, this is 1 in 100 chance, Caleb. Just let go. It's going to be fine.
Stoked.